Hi, this is Dr. Neela Bakore, and in this chapter of photosynthesis, we are done with the major important points, but we have to discuss few more things. So, we will finish everything today in this particular segment. We were talking about chapter photosynthesis. We discussed light reaction, dark reaction, that is Kelvin cycle. In light reaction, we also discussed the cyclic and non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Dark reaction, which is also known as C3 cycle or Kelvin cycle, which is a normal pattern in most of the plants. But there are some plants which to overcome the loss due to photorespiration perform C4 cycle. So, that also we discussed. Then we also talked about CAM plants, the plants which grow in desert conditions, and in them it is similar to C4 cycle, but the timing of different reactions is different in the sense of stomatal opening and closure. Now, we will discuss some more important things about photosynthesis. Let us talk about one very important point, which is limiting, or we can say the factors which control rate of photosynthesis. Factors controlling the rate of photosynthesis. There can be external factors and there can be internal factors. Most of the factors which regulate the rate of photosynthesis are external. So, let us take these factors. The first factor is light. Photosynthesis, obviously light dependent process, so light plays a very important role. Light, there are three things of this factor light which can regulate the rate of photosynthesis. It can be light intensity, it could be light quality, and it could be light duration, which is known as photo period. So, light duration or photo period. Now, how do these things affect the rate of photosynthesis? Light intensity. Now, whenever we talk of factors, we also talk about maximum, optimum and minimum things. So, before we actually talk about this, because we will be using these terms, let me just write one more important thing, which is known as cardinal point. Cardinal points. For every factor, there are three cardinal points: maximum, optimum and minimum. What does this mean? This means that every factor has three stages which affect the rate of any process. If we are talking of photosynthesis here and the cardinal points for light, so what would be, if we take light intensity, what would be the maximum? It is that maximum light intensity beyond which the rate of photosynthesis will stop. What is optimum? It is that light intensity at which the rate of photosynthesis is maximum. Minimum, it is that light intensity below which photosynthesis will stop. So, for every factor, there are 3 points which we have to discuss. So, maximum is, suppose we are talking of the light intensity, it is that intensity after which or beyond which the photosynthetic process stops. So maximum is that higher value, optimum is that value where it is maximum, minimum is that lower value beyond which the process stops. So beyond maximum, no process, below minimum, no process, and optimum is that where the process is maximum. So it is that value, we can write value if we have to generalize it. It is value after which or beyond which the rate of, or rather the photosynthetic process or any process, whichever you talk of, and if we are talking of cardinal points, that particular process will stop. Optimum is that value where the process is maximum, and minimum is that lowest value below which the process stops. This cardinal point, concept of cardinal point was given by Sachs. Okay, coming back to the factors which we were discussing, light intensity. Normally light is a factor which is available all the time. So as light intensity increases, as the sun rises from morning to noon, as the intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis will also increase. But if light intensity is very high, it will also be associated with increase in temperature, and if temperature rises, the process of photorespiration will also start. So with increase in light intensity, gradually the rate of photosynthesis increases, and at a very high intensity the photosynthesis declines and then finally stops. So first increases, and at a high intensity, photosynthesis stops. Quality means which particular wavelength are we talking about. If you remember, we talked about action spectrum and absorption spectrum. There were two wavelengths where the pigments were absorbing maximum, and we also saw the experiments conducted by scientists where maximum action was recorded in the form of evolution of oxygen. So which were those two wavelengths where we found maximum? One was red and other is blue. So in red light and blue light, or red wavelength and blue wavelength, are the ones where maximum photosynthesis. Here we are talking about the quality. Intensity is the quantity which is coming, and light duration. Okay, in quality, the plants which are deep underwater, they can absorb even green light. So they can perform photosynthesis in green light also, or green wavelength also. Coming to duration, there are plants which need longer photo period, there are plants which need shorter photo period for their photosynthetic activities or other processes. So normal photo period which is required is about 10 to 12 hours. Less than this, photosynthesis will decrease. More than this, photosynthesis will decrease. So again, this figure which we are writing, we are talking about the optimum. This is one factor. The next factor which can control the rate of photosynthesis is carbon dioxide. In the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide concentration is very, very low. But that less carbon dioxide is enough for performing photosynthesis. But if carbon dioxide concentration increases, if CO2 concentration increases. Then what will happen to rate of photosynthesis? For some time, photosynthesis will increase. So, increase in photosynthesis will take place. But very high concentration of carbon dioxide, very high concentration of carbon dioxide acts as a toxin. It is toxic to the plant. If you are able to recall, there were conditions which affect these photosynthetic processes when we talked of light reaction and dark reaction. So, here if concentration is slightly higher, photosynthetic process will increase. If concentration is very high, then that higher concentration becomes toxic to the plant. Third condition or third factor which can affect photosynthesis is oxygen. If oxygen is more, oxygen is produced as a byproduct in photosynthesis, but if oxygen is available in higher concentration, if oxygen is more, then rubisco will undergo or will help oxygenation process instead of carboxylation. So, increase in oxygen will decrease photosynthesis due to photorespiration. With increase in oxygen, decrease in the rate of photosynthesis is also known as Warburg's effect. What is Warburg's effect? With increase in oxygen concentration, decrease in the rate of photosynthesis. So, light we have taken, carbon dioxide we have taken, oxygen we have taken. What about water? So, if we say the fourth factor, first was light, then carbon dioxide, then oxygen. Now, suppose we take up water. What will happen if water is in excess or less? Obviously, less water will decrease the rate of photosynthesis because water is one of the raw materials for photosynthesis. So, less water, less photosynthesis. Less water will also decrease the rate of photosynthesis because opening and closing of stomata are controlled by endoosmosis and exoosmosis. When water moves into the guard cells, the stoma is wide open. If it is wide open, other things, that is gaseous exchange, will take place, carbon dioxide will be taken in and photosynthesis will take place. But if water is less, guard cells will become flaccid, stomata will close, and indirectly even carbon dioxide intake will be less, so photosynthesis will decrease. So, there are many reasons why less water decreases the rate of photosynthesis. One more factor which we can talk of is temperature. When we are talking of temperature, the optimum temperature, the temperature at which photosynthesis is optimum for most of the plants is 20 to 35 degrees Celsius. This is the optimum. What does this mean? That if it falls below 20, first the rate of photosynthesis will start decreasing and then finally stop. If it moves above 35, the rate of photosynthesis will decline and stop. High temperature high temperature. High temperature is like plus 10. So 45, 50, the rate of photosynthesis or photosynthesis actually stops. The reason for this stopping of the process is at higher temperature, the proteins which are acting as enzymes here, they get denatured. So, due to denaturation, this is due to denaturation of enzymes. All these factors are external factors. Internal factors, scientists believe that there is one factor, they have not isolated that factor, it is an imaginary factor, but scientists believe that this factor exists. It is known as protoplasmic factor. Protoplasmic factor. It is an imaginary factor. We don't know what exactly the substance is, but scientists believe that this factor, internal, it is present in the cell, as the name tells us, protoplasmic. This factor regulates the rate of photosynthesis. Because we don't know what substance it is, how it works, we just are, giving a hypothesis that probably this is what is happening. And this is internal factor because it is inside the cell. Then chlorophyll. Chlorophyll or pigments. This is also internal. Now, presence of chlorophyll is seen in all plants which are performing photosynthesis. Chlorophyll is essential because this is the pigment which is going to capture light along with the accessory ones, and chlorophyll A which is going to start the reaction. Chlorophyll quantity is variable and it is light dependent. In presence of light, chlorophyll synthesis increases. In absence of light, chlorophyll synthesis decreases. Not only decreases, this chlorophyll, it is lost. It becomes unstable and disintegrates. So chlorophyll is lost, and this results into yellowing of leaves. So quantity of chlorophyll is dependent on light exposure. So it is synthesized in light and it is lost when light is absent. So this yellowing of leaf takes place if you put the plant in dark for a little longer period of time. So chlorophyll content is variable depending upon the light which is available to the plant. So these two, that is protoplasmic and chlorophyll, these are the internal factors. One more factor which may play a role is arrangement and number of chloroplasts, but this is dependent on the requirement of the plant. When we talked about the cellular organelle, we said the chloroplast number and arrangement is dependent on light. Again, every leaf every leaf has to perform photosynthesis. If the light intensity is less, the chloroplast will get arranged parallel to the epidermis so that more and more light can be absorbed. If light intensity is high, then the chloroplast get arranged at right angles to the surface. So only little surface is available for photosynthesis. So these are also factors which affect the rate of photosynthesis. Whenever we talk of all these factors, one more term that we need to discuss here is limiting factor. If there are 4 or 5 different things required, which is that factor which controls the rate of photosynthesis. To understand this, let us take a simple example. Say there are substances A, B, C and D, and their molecules or quantity is 10, 12, 5 and 8. All these 4 have to combine to give us the product X. All 4 have to combine in the same ratio. This is, we are just trying to understand what exactly is the limiting factor. 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D will give you 1X. Second X. Third molecule, third will give you the third X molecule. Fifth A, fifth B, fifth C and fifth D will give us 5 X molecules. How many A's are remaining after 5 have been used? 5 remain. After 5 of B are used, there are 7 remaining. After 5 of C are used, 0 here. And after 5 of D, 3 are remaining. So 1, that is A, B and D are still present. But will we get X? Will synthesis of X take place? The answer is no. Which factor out of 4 is regulating this? The one which is in the least quantity. So, which factor acts as a limiting factor in any process? The factor which is in its least quantity or concentration. So, anything can be a limiting factor. Light, suppose there is no light. Carbon dioxide is available, water is available, enough of chlorophyll is there, everything is there, but there is no light. Will photosynthesis take place? Because we know unless and until light is absorbed, electrons are emitted, ATP, NADPH2 are synthesized, the next phase, that is dark reaction, will not take place. So light becomes a limiting factor. Can light become a limiting factor? We know that there is plenty of sunlight which is available to us. But light is a limiting factor in areas where we have dense forest, whereas there is a thick canopy and the light which is penetrating on the ground is very, very less, or the plants which grow in shady areas. So there light becomes a limiting factor. So concept of limiting factor is if there are 4 things which are required for a process, the rate of the process or the end product which is formed is controlled by the factor which is in its minimum quantity or quality. This is known as Blackman's law of limiting factor. Blackman's law of limiting factor, which says that in any process, the rate of the process is decided by the factor which is in its minimum quantity. So, in photosynthesis, anything can act as a limiting factor. Light can act as a limiting factor, but normally light is not a limiting factor. It can act when either the plants are growing in a thick forest where the penetrating light is very less, or the plants which are growing in shady areas. Duration, normally if it is like cloudy for a very long period of time and if they are not getting sufficient photo period, then this duration can also act as a limiting. Carbon dioxide can act as a limiting factor, but right now the situation which is existing is that carbon dioxide concentration is increasing. So, but yes, we have to take all the factors. If carbon dioxide is limiting factor, that means minimum is carbon dioxide, rest everything is in plenty, still the photosynthetic rate will be affected. Will oxygen become a limiting factor if oxygen concentration decreases? Suppose oxygen is the minimum one, light, carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, water, everything is available, only oxygen is less. Will it affect photosynthesis? Can it become a limiting factor? though it is not directly required for the process of photosynthesis. But in photosynthesis, ATP generation or energy requirement, which is for all these reactions to take place, are due to aerobic breakdown. So though photosynthesis is a separate part, but the energy requirement, it also comes from mitochondria and it uses oxygen. So it will affect the aerobic processes and ATP synthesis. So that will also indirectly act as limiting factor. Can water act as a limiting factor? That means suppose there is no water in the soil, you have not watered the plant. Light is in plenty, carbon dioxide, pigments are also enough. Will photosynthesis take place? This water is the raw material. So if raw material is not there, how will the plant synthesize its organic matter? So every factor can act as a limiting factor. Which one will act as limiting factor? The one which is in its least quantity or concentration. So Blackman mentioned that the least concentration substance or factor would act as the limiting factor, and that's why it is known as Blackman's law of limiting factor. Let us also talk about Hill's reaction, one more scientist and his contribution.